air supply autonomy, and surface air consumption rate. The simplest way to calculate your remaining air autonomy on the dive is based on the calculation of the variation in pressure in a unit of time, that is, determining the number of bar per minute or psi per minute. Imagine that you are at a certain depth on a dive and your pressure gauge shows a reading of 180 bar, 2,700 psi. After 10 minutes spent at the same depth, the pressure gauge reads 120 bar, 1,800 psi. This means that you have used 60 bars, 900 psi in 10 minutes, or rather 6 bars, 90 psi a minute. Remaining at the same depth, how long would the air in your cylinder last? The calculation is simple even underwater. If the consumption is 6 bar, 90 psi a minute, the remaining 120 bar, 1,800 psi of air will last for 20 minutes. But remember that the consumption of 6 bar, 90 psi a minute is only valid at that particular depth. To make this figure more meaningful, we have to use a particular depth as a point of reference. In our case, the easiest reference point to use is sea level. In practice, you have to calculate what your air consumption would be if you breathed in the same way, the rate on the surface. You therefore have to calculate your surface air consumption rate. To do this, just divide the air consumption calculated on the dive by the absolute pressure at that depth. In fact, with every respiratory act, you breathe in and out a quantity of gas molecules proportional to the absolute pressure. For example, let's imagine that our 6 bar, 90 psi a minute was calculated at a depth of 20 meters, 66 feet. The absolute pressure at this depth is 3 atmosphere. The surface air consumption rate is therefore 2 bar, 30 psi a minute, 6 bar a minute divided by 3, or 90 psi divided by 3. By knowing your personal surface air consumption rate, you can now work out your air consumption at any depth by simply multiplying it by the absolute pressure.